close out of these things. I've had such a long day of meetings.
It sounds like it,
It's
bro.
good to be
Goddamn.
doing this.
True. You can chill for now. Don't worry. This is very laid back, and there's probably going to be 2 people who are going to see this, so you're not on a high stage.
Well, I'll share it. So at least 3.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. That third is the most important.
Yeah, that's when that's the tipping point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the peak of my career. Yo, guys, what is up? Welcome back to the RedHeadRambles podcast. I'm your host, Shane, or Shanetor, if you prefer, with our lovely guest. I mean, I don't think you even need an introduction, but the man, the myth, the legend himself, Brian Clarke. If you are not aware, this man is the developer of the astounding game, quite frankly, the Mortuary's Assistant.
Yep. Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good, man. You've
It's
had
quite the intro. I feel very very flattered, very special.
That is the thing. You seem like, from the small interaction I've had with you, you seem very humble, which is it's a nice trait to find, especially like online doing these interviews.
I'm as much shock as everyone else every day.
So I won't waste your time. We'll jump straight into some of these things. What's the deal with Darkstone, man? Where did that come from? Where'd that name?
It came from availability. The thing is like, I really wish there was a great story behind it, but like, unfortunately, like a lot of names nowadays, it's just like, it's impossible to find a place that has the website domain available, the Twitter handle available, the YouTube, like, right? Like having all the things associated with your company, your brand being available. So what I did instead was I created a list of potential names. This was my community, like, Jesus, oh my God, almost 5 years ago now. Ugh.
Damn, bro.
But yeah, it was just a list of them. It's like, oh, these sound good together. This sounds good. Okay, search, see if it's available. Nope. Okay, what's the next one? The second best one. Okay, search if that's available. And that's how it came about. And then later on, I came up with the sort of like, oh, it's a tombstone. It's like a dark grave stone sort of thing. That's why the logo now is like this sort of tombstone frame around the skull and everything. So not as glamorous as I think people would like, but
you got that Xbox Live username set
pretty
up.
much, right?
Yeah. So the Mortuary Assistant, man, that game has just been popping off over the last year. Like, how are you feeling about that? Like, were you expecting it to like gain that much traction?
No, I mean, what was really interesting about it was, back when I did the first prototype that originally gained some traction, I was working on my previous project, Our Secret Below. It's like an escape room game.
Yeah.
And I had a Kickstarter going for it. And during that Kickstarter, I thought, well, it'd be great to have something that I could kind of show what I do, the sort of like horror and work that I like to do. And I had already made this prototype for the Mortuary Assistant it was like for patrons, like the previous Halloween or something. So I was like, well, I got this sitting around. I'll throw it up there on itch as just an example. And so that way maybe get some people interested in the sort of thing I do and not just this sort of unknown title. Right.
Right.
And then that's when,
the legend
someone in Discord. Well, that's when someone in Discord was like, they're like, Jacksepticeye's playing your game. And it's like, what? And so he had played the prototype, which was like 5 minutes. It was not very much, barely any gameplay at all, right? It's just collecting things and some random scares based on like the areas you walk around in the room and some timing stuff, just really simple base things. And then from there, it was like, a bunch of big YouTubers played it, and that gained a whole lot of interest. And so I was like, well, that's great, but that was to try and get this game some legs. So, well, now I need to finish this game. So I finished up Our Secret Below, and then immediately, like instantly, went into Mortuary Assistant work.
Understandable,
yeah, because, well, I mean, that was the first. I had made a few games since then, and this was the first one that I was like, oh, this is something. Yeah. So I should really focus on this. And then when I started doing the full work, I kept watching people play the prototype, trying to really analyze what people liked about it, and realized that I needed to really up the at the time random scare
Mm.
concept and the embalming. People really wanted to do the embalming, and so those were my two focuses, and that's what I did all the way up to the demo and then to release.
Right, because like even with the games that you have already, from what I could find, there was the subject, Our Secret Below, and you said something about Outstation. I couldn't find too much around that
Oh
one.
man, there's so many weird little ones. So the subject is my first like solo project, and it very much shows. I didn't. So my background is as an environment artist in video games,
Hmm.
and I've done a bunch of other things, but ultimately artist, right? And
Yeah.
so um, I had to teach myself to program, and I kept learning how to do all these different things, and then I got to a point where I was like, okay, I kind of know enough stuff where I could probably make some kind of game,
Right.
and that's where the subject came from. Was basically the culmination of all these different like things that I had kind of learned how to do, and it's not a bad game, but it's not the best game.
Right.
It's
Right.
very much my first, right? And then
I mean, we
from
all got to
there,
start somewhere, you know?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And from there came Our Secret Below. That's where I started to. It's actually where a lot of the things that started the haunt system, the stuff that drives the scares in Mortuary Assistant,
Right.
came from, like really baseline stuff. And then I did a smaller game called Cohate, which was just it was like 3 months. I made a variant of the subject basically, where I
Okay.
used it takes place in the same complex, same monster, so I got to
Right.
reuse a lot of stuff, and I made some new stuff as well. And it's kind of a different kind of game. It's more simplified. It's like a cat and mouse chasey thing, and some stuff you have to piece together to progress through the environment. But it's not like the subject where I throw four ridiculous puzzles at you
Okay.
to try and fill the pad the runtime, right?
Yeah.
But then yeah, Outstation was a failed Kickstarter,
Oh, okay.
but it was I really like the idea. It's still floating around. It was sort of this Firefly meets Battlestar Galactica style thing. That
Okay.
was a shoot 'em up actually, but it was a shoot 'em up mixed with a point and click adventure kind of thing.
Hmm.
So you would go out and do various missions where you would defend these mining corporations basically, and you would fight off waves of bad guys and do your usual shoot 'em up thing, and then you'd come back to whatever planet or station that was nearby, and you'd do the sort of point and click adventure style stuff and upgrade your ship and everything. So
Right.
I still think it's fun, but it wasn't successful in Kickstarter, and so I was like, all right, I only have so much time before I'm broke completely, so so I need to figure out what I need to do, and that's where I kind of leaned back into horror and went kind of full that direction.
That's fair. And that is interesting, like, that your game's been based around horror. Because, I mean, looking into it, like, you were involved with, like, Warhammer Online, right?
Yeah, that was my
And
first job in
you
the game
mentioned,
industry was Warhammer Online.
and you
Yeah.
mentioned Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy VII as some of, like, inspirations for some of.
Oh yeah, well those are yeah, like so I'm a huge Hideo Kojima fan.
Mm,
Like Metal Gear Solid was like one of the first games that I played where I realized that video games could be more than just games. Like there was a
yeah.
lot of movie aspects to stuff. He went a little hard on the movie stuff in later iterations, but it was still this marriage of like storytelling and gameplay that I really liked. And of course, Final Fantasy VII is one that's just it's a really great story. It hit me at the right age to kind of be super impactful as well.
Mm,
And so those were the things that really kind of got me, I think, interested in video games on a larger capacity. Not quite into making them yet, but it was definitely like what made me realize games could be more than
yeah.
just Mario, right?
Well, even when you look at, like, it doesn't even have to be as graphically amazing as Hideo Kojima's games. I mean, like, you look at the Life is Strange games, there's not a
Yeah.
ton of gameplay in there, but, like, it's still got quite a dedicated following in terms of, like, blending that cinema with gaming, in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of games that do things that are a little bit more cinematic than
Mm.
gameplay heavy. A lot of spectacle stuff, right? Like just basically you watch the game for a bit and then you press a button to make a choice, and then you watch the game for a bit, you press the button to make a delay. Like
Yeah,
Detroit Become Human, right?
yeah,
Is
definitely.
is a big one. and it's a beautiful game. The story's awesome. It's great. You're not playing very much. It's more of a choose your own adventure kind of
Yeah.
thing, right? And that's fine. There's fans for everything, and I think
Yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah.
think that was pretty awesome. So yeah, there's all sorts of stuff that defines like no games aren't defined by one specific thing anymore, right? They've
That's so
definitely
true.
branched
Yeah.
out into all kinds of styles of entertainment.
And it's funny to hear people still complain about games like being that type of game where it's like, oh well, I'm not really doing much. It's like even in the Mortuary assistant, like I mean, there's not a whole lot in terms of like what you are doing in a sense. Like I mean, with the embalming
Yeah, there's
process,
not
there's that,
combat
but
or
yeah,
anything or like
yeah.
yeah.
But it's
Yeah,
still grabbing
absolutely.
your attention, especially your game is definitely working a lot with tension, I feel like. Would you say?
Yeah, so that was the things that I really wanted to focus on. The original like one-liner design pitch I made for myself for the prototype was or after the prototype
Mm.
was it was dead bodies in a fun house where dead bodies are creepy and I knew I wanted to be able to control the entire environment. And so from that, I've always been really big on atmosphere. I think sound design and lighting, the setting that you're in is super important because
For
you need
sure.
to be able to suck the player in and get them invested in the area.
Yeah.
And once you have someone mentally existing in the space you've built, you can do a lot more things pretty convincing. Um, so that's kind of where I went first, and I knew I wanted something that made you feel kind of uneasy at all times. So I wanted something that felt like you're in a quiet room, but with the storm and stuff, it's not actually quiet. It's trying to set something where that's reminiscent of like times I've gone into the like to the basement where it's dark and it feels really weird down there. Or
Yeah.
like I used to be I was a busboy for a few years at a restaurant in Wisconsin, and it was supposedly a haunted place. And there are times I went up into the attic or down in the basement where it felt really uneasy, and I really wanted that, which is kind of how the
Yeah.
haunt system came about too, to try and make something that keeps people on edge and feeling like something's right behind them all the time.
Mm.
You know?
I love that in terms of making them feel something that simply that's probably not a great way to phrase it, but like I want to be an author, and when it comes to books, I know a lot of people who don't read books don't quite understand that feeling of like, well, you're just reading something. How are you gonna invest yourself in that? And it's
Mhm.
once you get inside your head, exactly like you said,
Yeah.
like you can kind of play around what people can
Yeah,
imagine
you
or
gotta
what
get the person once you have someone invested, it doesn't really matter what the medium is, right?
yeah,
It's just that hook. And part of it is if the person's coming in with the right mindset, you know,
yeah.
like if I'm gonna watch a horror movie, I'm in the mindset of okay, I'm gonna watch a horror movie. It's time for spookiness.
Yeah,
So, you
yeah,
know, lights off and all that sort of stuff. I'm gonna watch a comedy. I've got a very different mindset going in. So, you know, I've watched some people play the game where you know they're like a Twitch streamer and
yeah,
they're just talking to chat all the time and they're just kind of rushing past
yeah.
everything, and then they'll be like, well, this game's not scary, and it's like, well,
Yeah,
there's only so much I can do, right?
yeah,
I don't want to be like, no, you're playing it wrong. Like that's
yeah.
not the case.
I hate that
But at the
criticism
same
as well.
time, yeah, but at the same time, you know, if you're playing a horror game and you go in there with all the lights on and just
Yeah.
constantly running by everything and just rushing through it all, you're not going to take anything in. So, you know, there's a little give and take. You gotta be going in with the right mindset, I think.
It's definitely because like I've watched quite a few people play it. Personally, I don't have the equipment to play it at the moment. I've got it on Steam, but I mean, I'm running Among Us on this laptop at like 10 frames, so I think
Yeah.
I've got to leave it a while until I try it. But I am very much looking forward to it. But
Well, you
like,
have to gotta get that podcast going so you get the
exactly.
revenue in and get a new computer. Get this man a new computer.
That's what I've been saying. Like, but like I watched Jacksepticeye play it, and fair play to him. Like I
Yeah,
feel like when he does it, he tries to invest himself, at least on the first try. Like, I mean, in later terms, like when you're going through, he had a bit more comedy to it. But
sure.
how did you feel watching? Like, did you watch, say, Markiplier or Call Me Kevin
Oh yeah.
go through?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I watch not just the big guys. I watch as many videos as I can, and I always try to share as many videos as I can with no matter what size creator, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a weird experience to see the larger guys play. Like, yeah, Markiplier did 4 videos, which is
Yeah.
super rare, right? That doesn't
Yeah.
really happen. But he's getting in the mood. He's doing the night vision cam and stuff,
Yeah.
and it's like that's great. I love seeing that. And
Yeah.
Jacksepticeye did I mean, he did like themed stuff around the video for
His
it and
openers
everything.
and
And
stuff.
it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, it was really, really cool to see. And it's awesome to see something that people like that much, like they want to get into it in some capacity like that. And that's really, really cool to see. And I think I feel really fortunate because I don't think everybody gets that. Like
Yeah.
that's it's
Even with the
it's
lore
rare.
that you've put into the game, like I mean, that's gotten a lot of conversations going around that as well. But we'll touch on that later. But
Sure.
just to stick on atmosphere for a little bit, the voice acting is really well done in this. I've noticed at least. I don't think it gets talked
Mm.
about quite a lot. Like you play some indie games and you can tell like it was kind of a quick decision as to like, okay, we'll just get someone in to, do this
Or
and we
or
have
the
our
devs
lines.
doing it.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, no, fair play. Like I mean, there's not really anyone I can even point out that's like even like they did an okay job. I mean, like everyone really did a great job here, including who was it who did Valerie? Autumn Ivy?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Autumn Ivy did a great job. Melissa Medina did Rebecca, and then Adam Bennett did Raymond,
Mm,
and all fantastic actors. They did a really, really good job. What's interesting about it is the the way it kind of works, for at least the way I've had to do it,
mm.
because I haven't had any money making any of this stuff, so it's not like I can rent out a studio and have them all fly in and
Yeah.
record together. So they're not interacting together. So what I have to do is I've had to write a script for each of them, and I try to write scripts like movie scripts as opposed to just here's the lines of dialogue.
Yeah.
So I include a lot of like, here's what the character's feeling. They move over to this side of the room and look out the window, like just flavor things that kind of give extra bits of information. They'll take like 3 takes or so of each line, and then I'll get them back and I have to cut them together and make it sound like a conversation. So there have been times where I'll take half of the beginning of a word and the half of the same word in a different take and cut them together to try and get them to sort of have the inflection that I'm looking for, right?
That must
So
be
it's
a
this
very
weird
interesting
it's this weird
experience.
combination of like their acting plus kind of my acting because I'm cutting it together and making
Yeah.
it sound a certain way. It's really weird, but they've but it was what matters is the fact that they're so talented. They're so skilled. I don't use word talented too much. They're skilled at what they do in such a capacity that makes it really easy to edit that stuff together
Mm,
and make something that feels really good. Like every take pretty much that I got from them was usable in a way
yeah.
that is I would perceive as higher quality than like what you were talking about, a lot of a
Right.
lot of horror games. So it felt like a luxury a lot of times to be working with their takes and making something that sounded good, and then putting that in game and seeing it come to life. There's nothing like that. That's really good.
Yeah. And even with
Yeah.
the conversation for spoilers, the father and the
Mm,
father and Rebecca scene for that
mm.
like that positive ending, that was
Yeah.
really really well done too. Like I don't know if you like made it that way or if it was, like part and parcel with both the voice actors and the editing, but like it seemed so authentic for that conversation
Yeah,
between
it's
Rebecca and the father.
definitely all of it. It's definitely all of it because there was a lot of back and forth on that scene, where I was a little bit more picky with some of those where I was like, could I get another take with, a bit more of this or a bit more of that? And I also gave the actors the music that I used in the background so that they kind of understood the tone that I was going for.
Mm,
And that was one of those things where it's like, I knew I wanted to make a sort of heartfelt ending for Rebecca for one of them and sort of tied everything together. That was one of those things where I really didn't expect it to be received the way that it was. Like, I've written everything in the game. I've done
Right.
everything for
Yeah.
it, right? So for me, I'm like, this is the happy ending. There we go. I finished it, right? Because I've already put all the work into. I remember writing the script for that. I was playing the music that Cody Paul's music, the composer that I worked with, fantastic, super talented. I was playing that over and over again. And like, I remember writing the script, like tearing up at parts of it because I was really trying to get in the mood and everything. But then after that, I'm like, okay, I just need to make this thing. It's done. Great.
Yeah.
And so when people were telling me that it's like, oh, this really meant a lot to me. I had some people tell me that it resonated with them because it was similar to stuff they had gone through in their lives, and like, so it was really important to them when they had that experience. I was like, wow, I never expected that. I
Yeah.
like, you already don't expect people to play your game, much less like your game, much
Yeah.
less become connected to your game in some way.
It's
So
impressive because
it's pretty wild.
it's not as if it's not like it's Days Gone or Last of Us where like you're playing through like all these hours with these characters and you get to know them over like a long period of time. It's depending on how many tries you give it, it is quite a short period of time to be working with these characters and to actually feel that emotional connection so like soon is impressive. Like,
Yeah. Well, I think part of it, if I had to guess, like the success of that is partly due to what we were talking about earlier, getting people kind of invested in the game in more than just the character. They're kind of invested in the existence in that world. Like
right.
they're invested in the environment. They're really hooked by the ambience and the haunt system doing its thing to the point where you you're really like worried about things being behind you all the time. And I think that sort of mental state that you get into, this is just a theory. I think
Mm,
when the mental state you get into, you have to be pretty invested already in things to feel that way.
mm.
So once you get the bits of story and kind of piece it together, I think you're already firing on those cylinders. So I think it's a little easier to become invested in the characters. If I had to guess,
For sure.
because I mean, I obviously I wanted to try my best to tell a story the best I could and give these side events, these side pieces of story that fleshed everything out. But I was uncertain how it would all come together or how it would be perceived anyway
Yeah.
once it all came together. Of like, all right, players are picking up pieces of story. I really hope that they manage to piece it together in a way that gives them the experience that I'm hoping to give them.
Yeah. It was nice of you as well to not like shove the entire story in people's face as well. I mean, like if you play through the game, you'll get a gist of it, but if you want to go searching for more, then the option is there in your notes and everything that you've piled around. I know you referenced that at one point, saying that you wanted to keep that kind of not mandatory in terms.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, the patch I just put out with the Halloween stuff removes the story, has an option to remove the story elements
Oh,
completely if
really?
you want to just do, yeah, if you
Oh,
want to
just for
just
fun,
do
right? Yeah,
the embalming. Yeah.
yeah.
If you want to just do the embalming and just have the haunting events, you still get some of the endings. Some of the endings you need the story for, but I wanted to be able to give people that experience. But yeah, that was like to have these events that I didn't. It's really weird because you're not playing the game to go through a story like I think you usually do.
Mm.
I kind of sort of cross my fingers that the player would be into the idea of piecing some stuff together themselves, right?
Yeah,
I think a lot of games kind of beat you over the head with like, this is the story, this is what you do, this is what
yeah,
you have to do to get this part of the story, right? And so I really wanted to try and give the player some credit and
yeah,
be like, well, hopefully they'll pick up this piece and this piece and they'll realize that something's going on, but maybe not what fully, and it would drive them to want to play again to get more of the endings. And I'm sure there are people that played it once and went, I get it
yeah,
somewhat, and then we're done, right? But I was hoping that some people would become invested to the point where they wanted to play, they wanted to get all the endings because they'd get all the story events and then they'd know everything that's been going on,
Mm.
with some questions getting raised, I guess, because Raymond is still a kind of a big question
He
mark for
is. He's
people.
quite a curious individual. Um,
Yeah.
with that as well, uh, Oh, my brain's done one on me. I can't remember.
Happens to me all the time. I hate it when the thought train just
Yeah,
just
it's
goes
just it's
away.
so much. It's like, let me ask
Yeah,
like these
that
50 questions and get no response.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's jeez, when I have when I'm doing like interviews and stuff, like all the time, I'll get a question and I'll answer some of it, and then halfway through my thought, I'm like, oh no, I lost it. What am I saying? Okay, okay, sir, just do some filler, and then you'll think of it, and you
Yeah.
come back to it, right? So yeah, no, I totally feel that. But I mean, you were mentioning Raymond was kind of a I don't know if he's a like a favorite. He's certainly a character that I was surprised that people connected with in the way they did. Like he's I know he's a compelling character because he's got a big question mark on him. But I didn't think that he's sort of become a character that everybody that's like is a fan of the game has kind of been like they like Raymond the most. Like
Well,
Rebecca's great and
because
everything, and
yeah.
but like Raymond's kind of an interesting character, which was not unsurprising but interesting to me.
Well, I feel like he pulls your morality into question. Like when it comes into like, he's this guy who's gotten himself into the situation that he didn't ask for, and it's like, do you do these bad things in order to stop more bad things happening, like in the long term, or like I mean, he's keeping Valerie in the basement.
Yeah, you definitely you get a piece of that with the basement stuff and
Yeah,
that ending.
it's like a good guy
You
forced
get
to do bad things for you know.
Yeah, I think Raymond is compelling because he exists in a gray area,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like he's not good, he's not bad. I mean, he is, but isn't. So,
yeah,
you're like everybody can kind of draw their own idea of maybe like who Raymond is potentially, right?
yeah,
Um, I think most people ultimately think Raymond is like good
yeah.
ish
Except for that
more
first part
than
when they
more than
walk in and
evil.
he's behind the desk and scares the shit
Yeah.
out of them.
Yeah. I was so pleased that worked. Someone asked me in a tweet like yesterday, day before yesterday, something like that, where they asked if that was intentional, and I was like, yeah, there's a note in my script for Adam that it's like this is meant to be sort of a soft jump scare for people. So it'd be great if this was delivered with a little bit more of like like, oh
Yeah.
great, you're here, kind of thing. And so it's super pleasing to see things like that play out. And when you intend to do something and that intent it works, that
That
feels really awesome.
must be pretty satisfying. In terms of the lore, I've
Mhm.
I've had this question. Have you ever played the Doom games or like any experience with them at all?
Dune?
Doom, like Doom
Doom.
Eternal.
So okay, I've played the original Doom and
Right.
some of the newer ones, but not I have not played. I would say I have not been involved enough in the newer generation of it
Right.
to really speak like, oh yeah, I totally know what's going on with
Right.
this, that sort of thing, right? So I
Well,
don't want to claim to be otherwise.
in Doom they have like this demonic language that they work around, and it's kind of hard. Like I've been through Reddit posts and interviews to try and get an answer as to like where they went in terms of doing that demonic language. You yourself have kind of got a similar vibe in your game. It's Ethnian language.
uh, um,
Lost in
Ethan
the
is
Library of Alexandria, something like.
it's yeah. So there's Ethan and then Antahine, which
Yeah,
is
the
the like
like
the
demonic version.
demonic version.
Yeah.
So yeah, this all sort of came about with the demo actually, where it was before I went the route that I did with uncovering the sigils and stuff. I was going to have some more puzzle elements and everything,
Mm,
but that ended up being such a common thing in horror games that um, I got to this point where I didn't want to use puzzles as like as the core mechanic
right.
anymore. I decided that like they're either really easy for people or really difficult for people, and then either people like it or they don't. And puzzle games aren't for everybody, so
Yeah,
I'm
and
going
the
to keep
last thing you want to
puzzles
do is
for
frustrate people, and then you're just
exactly. So I moved away from that. But in the demo, the it the puzzle hint was a like a pentagram that burns into the ground. And there's a bit of like a little riddle thing in there. And someone commented on the Steam community site that actually, you know, they're Wiccan, and this symbol is actually for protection, because when it's a pentagram in a circle, it's a protection thing. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And I'm like, well, okay, how much more will I do with demonic stuff that I will end up not knowing unless I do a ton of research in
Right.
all directions, right? Which I've already done a ton of research for the embalming and all this other stuff. And so what I decided to do, what I figured the safest thing to do would be to just make shit up. So
I was
I
wondering if it was actually like, hold up, guys, I'll get the game out. I just gotta read the book of Genesis real quick, and I'll get back to you.
yeah, I just realized that wasn't sustainable, like a sustainable way to do things. Because I really wanted to be accurate with things, and that goes into all corners. Like I didn't want to put as much as I could into embalming and then phone it in with other stuff. So what I decided to do was, if I create my own demonology that's loosely based in like Christian mythology, stuff like
Yeah.
that, you know, kind of pulling from things loosely,
Mm.
then I'm never wrong. So
That is a good
I
like line of logic. Yeah, that works.
yeah. So what I ended up doing was creating this concept of how hell was formed, and that there's these houses of hell, and each demon that are like the prominent demons within those houses utilize these lesser spirits to communicate with the outside world, and that's how you get the woman in white, the mimic, the shadow man, right? Those are the lesser spirits that are used to kind of pierce the veil, right? And with that, I decided it'd be cool to have a language that sort of justified certain things. There were different iterations of the game design where I wanted to have names for different things that made sense in the lore of the greater
Right.
game. Also, there's a lot of lore that I've written that just isn't in the game, just because I wanted something to support what I made, so it felt like there was depth to it, right?
Yeah.
And part of that is the language for things, where the idea of like the name for like blood versus blood of sin, and like demonic tongue only has the word for the blood of sin. They don't have one for just like regular blood. They
Yeah.
don't have a word for holy
Because that was
or anything
interesting
like
to me.
that.
Because like it did. I mean, fair play. You bluffed me. I thought it was legit. I was reading. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I see no reason to question
Well,
this.
that's why I wanted to, like, I feel like not everybody gets into lore, and a lot of people especially don't want to dig in and read everything,
Yeah.
right? But I wanted something there for the lore buffs if they wanted to know what was going on. And so I felt, I'm a huge fan of Tolkien, right? And
Of course.
he started, like, Lord of the Rings kind of started as like a language that
Yeah.
he made and then started fleshing out from there. So I really wanted something that was like, oh, there's more to this, and that's how the language stuff came about. And yeah, the idea that Alexandria was a great point for it to be lost, and kind
Right.
of tied into why this sort of stuff that Raymond's been making with the mark, and using the blood for everything, and like how it does seem like it would tie into this. And if there's lost information on this stuff, this makes sense that Raymond's sort of recovering it. If you go in the basement, there's some back and forth with another person about kind of trying to figure this stuff out. And
Yeah.
so it gives a little bit of a window into Raymond's past, somewhat trying to deal with these issues. And I think coming up with the demonology kind of helps support that, in that not only does it give it some depth for people that are interested, but it gave me a lot to work off of. When I came up with that stuff, it was like, oh, well, I could have story that the mark came from this, or this thing works this way, because that would make sense for the, you know, demonic to
Right.
be involved in this capacity, right? So coming up with that lore, while again it's not in the game, it really gives a lot of weight, I think, to things that help make it feel like it's got more history to it. And so that's how all that stuff came about. Then I wanted to do creepy stuff with the language recordings underneath from dead bodies, and then you know, the video that I did
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the demonic like Twitch and stuff. Like that's all fun stuff that I just like to do, and kind of help
Yeah.
flesh out things and support things a bit, I think, too.
Yeah, no, it worked pretty well. I mean, it caught my interest when I read it, especially again, like with I said about Doom, because I think they said the same thing. Like they just made it up, but they take inspiration from certain like phrases, Latin wise or whatnot. Um,
Yeah.
one of the endings you have, by the way, I was watching Mark. He flew through the game at the start. He just guessed a body, threw it in, and
Mm.
Raymond slapped his ass into a coffin without saying a word out of
Yes.
disgust. Was that
Yeah.
intentional, or was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those endings are not, I don't count them as the 5 endings that you can get.
Mm,
There's 2 though that you get that end that way. And I wanted I needed to come up with something that, there's a lose state. It's a game. You got to have a game over somehow. But I
right.
didn't want something where people would put effort in and then just get a game over screen. I wanted them to get something that would make them go, "What?"
Yeah.
And like want to know more about what's going on, because I think when you are first introduced to this game and then if you end up getting that ending, that's like this real, like, okay, obviously a lot of weird stuff is happening. I have no idea what, but something's happening here. So I wanted to show like who Raymond is a little more, give a little bit of info on this, on the basement, the fact that you see the thing you're being shoved into on the other side of the room, just so you kind of, it gives you an idea of what is happening.
Yeah.
At least you're being put in this weird box. It's also the box that you see in one of the story events at the very beginning. There's one of them
Oh,
shows
when it
up.
comes.
You're doing your thing and you hear the screaming and everything, and you turn and look down the hall and you see one of those caskets like kind of wiggling with the
Mm,
screaming, and you walk up to it and interact with it and it slides back into darkness. That's one of there's story events related to Rebecca and there's story events related to the mortuary, right? And that's
yeah.
one of the mortuary ones. So I wanted something that if you got that event and you got that ending, they sort of tied together. Maybe you haven't gotten into the basement yet. It gives you a little something. Because you've been possessed, kind of like
Yeah.
with what happens. And then if you go a little further into the game, like I forget what it is. I think I have some time-based stuff and body-based stuff. So it's like depending upon how far you are in the game, if you do the same thing, you get the basement ending again, but it's longer. And you start out chained to the wall. And there's a
Okay.
little bit of like Rebecca going, what the hell's going on, kind of thing. And Raymond picks her up, says he's sorry, puts her in there. And then Rebecca has more dialogue where she starts laughing at him and starts, saying some weird demonic
Yeah.
shit, and like starts getting to this point where you see, okay, now I know for certain that I am possessed. And Raymond does something with bodies that are possessed. And there's another closed coffin at the other end of the room, right? So I wanted to try to build these things to kind of give a lot of interest in where the story could be going and what it is Raymond's doing, and then those obviously get answered when you manage to get down there. So they're meant to be like extra things that if you end up getting that loss, you get something out of it still,
I,
So that's why those are structured the way they are.
I love the fact that like the whole entire thought behind it was to like help you realize there's more of a story. And like the way I took it from watching his, because it was just so instant, like how he just flew through it. It was almost like, fuck you for just rushing through my game. No, just get in there and do it again.
There's, I mean, it could certainly be taken that way.
It's just the fact that he says nothing and he's like,
Yeah,
no.
yeah. It's very, yeah, I did want something that was fast when, if someone was trying to like just speed run it, plow through it, like you're saying, like
Yeah.
Mark did, right? Just like shot right through it. So it's a very like violent, like, yeah, you get a little bit of that. What the hell, man? So,
I like it.
I'm glad it works on those levels.
Mm.
You never know till it's out in the wild if it's going to be
True, that's the
successful in
thing.
that way.
And you're not going to get it with like every single person who plays the game either. Like not everyone's going to
Mm.
have that. Not everyone's going to get that ending and not everyone's going to like take it that way, you know.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of everything in the game with
Yeah.
this. The approach that I took for it was kind of a risk because I put a ton of work into the haunt system. Like it's not just RNG. There's a lot of stuff that runs what happens in the game. And there's a little over 100 events now that can happen.
Mm.
And I had to, part of what makes it feel like it's not just random is the fact that I had to accept that you're not going to see everything, right? There's going
Right.
to be a lot of stuff you don't see. There's a lot of events that fire and are just waiting for the player. And if they don't come by and do the thing that they're waiting for, they disappear. It goes back into the system and then it picks something else, right?
Right.
So those things are kind of meant to kind of help lend to that same idea of like something's always over your shoulder kind of thing, and you
Yeah.
don't know what's going to be happening. So that I think is what kind of like what's really kind of cool is to see that unfold in all the different YouTube videos as well.
Mm.
You know,
Oh, for
like
sure. Like, I mean,
yeah,
I've watched 5 different series of the game, and I'm still seeing new stuff, like, even now.
yeah, yeah, and that's been one of the things that's been really fun to see actually is
Mm.
like you're talking about Markiplier playing it. Well, I see people in the comments from Markiplier's videos saying, "Oh, I watched Jacksepticeye play it, and he had this thing happen, and this thing happened, right?" And
Yeah.
same for like Corey Kenshin and like everybody that played it, they've had different experiences, and that was really nice to see. But that's part of that gamble we were talking about. It's just
Yeah.
this idea that you may not see half of these things, right? And that's something that I think is a little freaky as a developer
Yeah.
to be like, I'm designing half this game or more to not be seen ever in the hope that people will like it, right?
Yeah. And, like, I am so happy that the majority of people have been so supportive of this, because it is like when you put anything out, but it's definitely in like horror, like people are going to definitely be critical in terms of like, oh well, this isn't scary, or that, that didn't get me, I'm special, like
Yeah.
uh
Yeah, for me too. I'm happy that people like it because I mean, like, yeah, there's plenty. Oh, when I got towards the end of development, I would play through it and I'd be like, this isn't scary. Like, none of this is scary. Like,
right.
I'm super desensitized, right?
Yeah, oh,
Like,
I
there are
bet,
people
yeah.
that jump in and they go, "Oh my god, embalming a body." And for me, I've been doing the embalming a body for 2 years now. So I'm like, this is nothing. I'm like, okay, yeah, stab around your abdomen a bit, just get through it so I can get to the next thing and test this, you know? And so for me, when I'm right at the end of development, yeah, I'm playing all that and no event is like scary to me. I didn't believe like, oh man, I was so nervous the night before. I was just laying in bed, unable to sleep, going like, the story sucks. No one's gonna be able to get it. Nothing's scary. Everything's wrong with this thing. This, I was just certain that it was awful.
Yep.
Even though I like knew that I was working on something. I think part of that stress came from knowing that I was working on something that could potentially do well with people because the demo was well received. And
Well, I
so,
mean, like high risk, high reward. I mean, it definitely feels like it's paid off.
yeah,
um
I mean, that's yes, definitely high risk.
a quick little bit, because like I mean, I've got some questions here that are definitely more
Mhm,
like need explanation, and then little bits that I just want to definitely poke in here, because I mentioned this
yeah,
on your stream that I entered. The woman in the photo in the reception. You
mhm.
mentioned that's actually because so many people comment on it. Like, I don't think I've seen a single person go through that reception without mentioning at least once about the photo. Um, you
Yeah.
you mentioned that that's like an older model of the woman in white.
Yes. So there's an event that I would like to plug back in, but it
Mm,
was the first one when I was building out the haunt system and trying to figure out how I want things to fire and the idea of different sized events based on progression. I had made this event where you've got the picture there of the woman in white just like rendered out and made to look like a painting. And the event happens when you go into the hall, the doors close, the lighting changes, and the door opens back up, and there's just a shadow projected on the wall pointing at the picture. And
okay.
you can't tell immediately because it's a render of the same person, but the face has depth to it and the eyes are open. And so it looks like it's a trick just with the picture,
Mm.
but then when you get closer, the woman in white jumps out at you and grabs you, right? And you
That's
get
what I
knocked
was
down to the
thinking. I was
floor and
wondering. Yeah.
yeah. So there was, that's the thing, is everybody mentions like, I can't believe there isn't an event tied to this thing. And it's like, well, there was. I just I had to redo it when I remade the model, and I had changed how I was doing part of the haunt system. That event just was broken. It didn't work anymore. And I had so many other things I needed to get done that I was like, all right, I'll
Yeah.
circle back to that one of these days and add that in. Because I mean, I'm going to keep adding events.
Oh, of course.
That's something that I just want to do. So especially because there's only like two large events. There's the looping hallway and the grandma event, and I
Yeah.
would really like to have a lot more larger events.
That grandma bit is
Um,
very well done, actually, because like the amount of people that like at first they give the window a chance and like, oh, okay, I've seen this, and then they go to the hallway and then they just get slapped with that second one. That's
yeah,
quite well done.
that was
That's it. You go ahead. You go ahead.
so that was the first thing that I did where I wanted to start doing some reactionary stuff. Like the haunt system already places things based on what the player's doing, but I realized that it's like, if the player, what if they rush at the ghost? What if they decide that they're going to be super
Aggressive.
brave
Yeah.
and just say, yeah, exactly, they're going to be aggressive with everything? It's like, well, I need to start thinking about that stuff. And so the grandma event was the first one where I was like, okay, let me put some triggers down each hallway. I'm going to have to do some extra work, but if they decide to leave, something will happen if they decide to leave, and it'll play differently. And it's like, well, that's actually pretty cool, because now even in the same event, if someone sees it one place, it'll be different for someone else if they decide to go somewhere. So once I did that, I started doing more events that had a lot more reactionary stuff. So there's stuff with like the Shadow Man that's calling out to you using Rebecca's voice,
Yeah.
and you can ignore it, but if you go up to it, it'll poof out away. And you're like, okay, well, that was, spooky, creepy, whatever. But if you turn around, the dead body's behind you and the light turns off. And
Oh.
then there's other stuff that happens where it could go one way or another randomly. Just sort of, it'll flip a coin for you, and it might go one way or another. But just things that happen based on that idea that the player could just be like, whatever, I'm just gonna run after it, right? So I started doing more reactionary stuff like that towards the end of development. I plan to do a lot more of that sort of stuff. I think that's fun.
Not using that woman in the photo may actually benefit you in the long term, because like, you're gonna have someone who's like super cocky and they're like, I know there's nothing here. What you need to do is like silently add that back into the game at some point, and then everyone.
Well, that's how all that that I think is the beauty of the updates anyway, right? When I do things, I'm just like, added more haunting events, and it's like, well, you don't know what they are or anything. So yeah, I'm hoping a lot. The other one is everybody wants to see something with Jesus.
I was just about to say,
Picture
when are
by
we
the
gonna get the
bathroom.
Jesus Christ jump
That's
scare?
that's the other one. We have Jesus jump out at you or something. I don't know.
Give
We'll
you like
see.
a
But yeah,
baptism or something.
yeah, well, those things are in the back of my mind, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm cognizant of when people are like, oh, I'd really, something should happen here, right? And so I don't want to immediately do those things, but I do want to eventually do those things.
Fair.
But there's there are some people have suggested like the body needs to jump out and grab you more and stuff, and it's like, well, part of it is like, I'm intentionally not doing that, because you get close to the body and you're uneasy all the time waiting for it to do something. And then when it doesn't do something, hopefully the goal with that is that the tension is now much higher.
Yeah, the
Because
build
you're
up
like,
to release.
yeah, and that's the approach for the entire game, is trying to build and build and build, and then you get the moment that you want, right? And I didn't want to have something that people would start to feel is just a jump scare game, where every single time something happens, right? I wanted something where you're doing a lot of things where you would expect something, and then I don't do it.
Yeah.
And that's like Edgar Allan Poe, The Raven, right? Where it's like you open the door and there's nothing there.
Well, that's exactly it.
And
I mean, like, the thing that's going to scare you more than like some asset in a game is going to be your own head, right? I mean, like your own feelings of, that that's like caveman-esque feeling of like, I'm being watched. You know, like there's the darkness is bad, unknown is bad. I don't know what's gonna happen
Yeah,
when I go in here.
that's it. That's exactly it. The fear of the unknown thing. You know, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That is exactly the like that was my core like rule for a lot of things was like people are scared by stuff they don't know, right? That's why
Mm.
spooky sounds in your house are more creepy than like knowing what the sound is,
Yeah.
right? So that's why I do a lot of peekaboo stuff, a lot of haunts where it's like something's looking at you and disappears, right?
I
Because I
love
don't
them, man.
want you
Yeah.
I don't want you looking at something for any extended period of time. Because I don't want to give you time to analyze it, right? I don't want you to be able to be like, I don't want you to see the zipper, right? I don't want you to
Yeah.
see the zipper on the monster costume.
Yeah.
So, so that's why each thing is very like you get a glimpse and then it goes away, or the lights go out, or some other thing happens, right? And it's all part of that same build of like I don't want you to see the things that are happening. I don't like if you're expecting something to happen, I want to withhold that a little bit so that the tension rises a bit, right? And
Yeah.
that's the goal. That's what I'm trying to do with each of those. And you know, I think ultimately, you know, a good number of them are successful in that
Yeah,
way.
no, for sure.
But
I mean,
it's up to the player to
yeah.
decide if that is the case.
For me personally, I feel like the woman in white does a really really good job of it, as well as the mimic. But the only thing I'll say about the mimic is that like I'm torn personally with the animation because like the the creaking animation for the body is quite creepy. But at the same time, like I don't know whether it would be better or worse to like see the mimic when you turn around and then have him disappear quicker, or to have that creepy animation go away. I mean, it's a case of like you can either do it or you can't. You know, it's like you can't have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, well, I mean, so there's a lot of ones where the mimic goes away pretty quickly. I
Mm.
mean, it's I think the one that everybody really knows well is the one on top of the cabinet where the
Yeah.
mimic's like crouching on top, right? And that one you have a little more time to see the animation, right? But that intentionally I wanted to do the choppy animation thing because I feel like you see that a lot in movies
Mm.
and especially in like their trailers and stuff. So I wanted one of the things I tried to hit with everything was some level of familiarity and something that was based in reality, so that when you see things, your brain already has something there that it builds off of, right? So
Mm.
I wanted something that even in that you're like, oh, I've seen that in like horror movies that I've seen. So it's not, I don't want to say it's more real, but
Yeah.
I think because it has a foothold in your brain already, it resonates in a different way. And that's the same for like, you know, the embalming. I wanted something that was based in the reality and tried to be as realistic with it as I could for the game design sake,
I
so
mean,
that if people were like, "Is that how it's done?" They Google it, and yeah, that's how it's done, right? And
even the embalming process for some people was enough to creep them out. Like aside from the ghosts,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. Well, I mean, I think the novelty of embalming a body is the thing that really gave it legs in the first place.
yeah,
You know
it's
that
ironic.
from
Oh, sorry. It's
this
Discord. It makes it hard to tell when people are going to say
all right, go
something.
ahead. Go ahead. I have nothing important to say anymore.
I'm sorry, bro. You're important here. Don't worry. Uh, fuck, I don't remember what I'm gonna say now. I've cut you off for no
Ah, I did
reason.
it. I made
Cunt.
you lose it. I made you lose it.
That's karma. All right, I shouldn't have. I should have interfered. Damn.
This is gonna be one of those things where you play it back and you go, "Oh man,
Yep. Yeah, it
I
is.
know exactly what I was gonna say now."
I have an idea of what I was gonna say, but with the Conjuring,
Mhm.
you ever see like that clap scene?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um, I was picturing, like when your body does the snap of the fingers and the lights turn out.
Mhm.
It like I again I don't know like how it works with programming, but it's probably a lot more complicated to put in. But like when you're walking through, like I keep imagining like what if like you had the finger pop up from like coming out of your view, like like someone coming up to touch your shoulder, but because you can't see their
Yeah. Yeah.
shoulders, it becoming past your face.
Yeah. So it's not too difficult to do. What I would probably do is similar to what I think they did in PT. People mentioned this before, where the ghost is like attached to you, like it's
Yeah,
always behind you. not in like a suspenseful, ooh, it's always behind you kind of way. Like it is
literally on your
technically
back. Yeah.
attached to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so what I would probably do is have like a set of arms for like each spirit that I wanted to be able to do that with, and they would just be invisible, turned off, attached to the player's head. And then when I wanted to use it, I'd turn it on and have the animation play and do its thing, and then they disappear, right? So it's not impossible to do. It's and I've thought about it, but I wanted I ended up not doing stuff like that because I wanted to write a system that was a little more than just attaching something to you. I wanted something that would actually check to be like, is there anything behind you? Is there space? Can I be standing there now? Right.
Yeah.
And then plop something down there so that I could do things like that if I wanted, but then also just put something directly behind you. So if you like just walk around the room and then turn around, there's something there.
Yeah.
And it's not in the something there in like one of the predetermined places that I've placed it. It's like wherever the player is, it's like been standing there, right?
Right.
So that's something I do in our Secret Below. I do a backwards check for some things. I wanted to do that for this, but that was a whole other system where I was like, I gotta focus on polish. I gotta focus on this, that, and the other thing. I got the story events and endings done. So, you have all those things and you've got to just convince yourself that it's like, all right, this is going to have to be for a patch or something.
To be fair, I mean, there's no rush in getting scares out. I mean, like even if it takes, the longer it takes, you can kind of like draw out like interest in a way. Like, the longer between.
Well, I think there's, if I can put out like a patch that's like, X number of new haunting events and stuff like that, I think people will be like, oh, cool. I got to come back and check that out. Right. Which is really what I want. I want people to want to play Mortuary Assistant more than just once. I want it to be something that, every Halloween rolls by and they go, oh, well, I got to play Mortuary Assistant a little bit. Right.
Yes,
Like that's what I really want in the end. That would be super, super cool. But
it has that good vibe to it because it's not like hopping into Outlast or something where you have to go through a whole story. You can pretty simply.
Yeah, and that's one reason with the new patch why I also removed gave the option to remove the story elements, so that if people want to just do the night in the life of Rebecca, like you could just do that and embalm and have spooky events happen. So that way, if they do want to hop in and check stuff out and see if there's some new things, it's a little more inviting for them to do that.
Torture the poor woman 50 to 100 times for the achievement.
Yeah, basically. Well, that's some people, they've got the like, oh, I've gotten all the achievements, and I'm like, one of those is to burn like 50 bodies, or embalm 100. Like, wow, that's really awesome. That's great. That's awesome, but it's still, that's so much effort. That's really cool.
Did you ever watch Shutter? It's a small horror that came out. It wasn't like amazing or anything, but it was okay.
I might have. Let me hold on. Let me pull it up and see if
that's the right name.
Jogs the memory.
Like a camera shutter.
I think. Let me see. Shutter is indeed an actual movie.
It is. That's a good start.
Oh, I don't. Ooh, this looks great though. Nice.
It was all right.
I don't think I've actually seen this, but it's, I mean, a horror movie can still be not great, but have awesome imagery.
Yeah, no,
right?
for sure.
Like, that can happen. Is this a Japanese film?
It's not Japanese, but it's got like, it's based in Japan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I mean, some of this looks awesome, but
I won't say what.
Yeah, no. So I don't believe I've seen this one.
No, good. It'd be a bit spoilers if I say it then, because you might like the film, so I'll leave that one lie. But
all right.
But yeah, my brain's gone for a second. Sorry. Oh yeah, Jane Doe. Fun. The Autopsy of Jane Doe. You've had a lot of comparisons to that one. Personally,
definitely.
I thought the film was a bit overhyped, to be honest. I only watched it there a few months back. But like you're saying there, like some movies, they can have concepts that you really like, but you may not entirely like the movie itself. How did you find the movie after experiencing it?
So I hadn't seen it
Yeah.
when I made the prototype. and I still hadn't seen it up until the demo. And then after enough people likened it to that, I was like, okay, maybe I should check this out, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, I agree with you, where it's like I'm. It's not a bad movie. Don't get me wrong. It's not bad. It's just like there were definitely things where I was like, I wish they had done like they had a lot of great opportunities and a lot of great concepts, and then things that ended up not happening. And one of the things that bugged me a lot was the fact that the witch lady never got up and did anything.
Yeah.
And I know what they were doing. My camera's gone to complete crap. There we go. I know what they were doing.
About like, bro, I've got a blue shine on my corner.
I'm all blurry now. Let me get in focus. But I know that they were trying to build a lot of suspense around it, right? Like you're expecting something to happen with her, and it doesn't. So that's a really good way to build the suspense. But the problem is, for me anyway, when you do that, people want that payoff at some point.
Yeah.
And it never gives that to you. So there's a whole lot of this like, oh, is she gonna do something? Nah. And then you get another, oh wait, now she's gonna do something. Oh no, okay. And then they don't do that the entire movie. So it's like
it's
by
like
the end. By the end, I'm just like, well, come on, man. It's like the movie it's like they give you one last middle finger when the toe wiggles at the end. And it's like, come on. No.
You've perfectly described my feelings about it. And one gripe I had with it as well was that death of the girlfriend came out of nowhere. Like it felt so like just we need some drama. We can't kill the old dude. We can't kill him. Fuck it. Who else do we got? Like,
well, they're like, we're trapped and we can't get out. How are we gonna get out of here? And then the door opens and the girlfriend's like, hey, how's it going? You know, and so it's like, of course she's gonna get an axe to the chest because there's no way in or out. And then they're like, oh no, it was really her. It's like, well, how? How was it really her? So yeah, there's just things like that where you know, again, I don't want to speak disparagingly of anything.
Oh no, like I can appreciate concepts of it, but
it's a good, but that's the thing is it's a great concept. I think it is a decent enough horror movie. But then there's so many things where I feel like there are missed opportunities or just like, little things like that where it's like a weird, like, they just did it to have that instead of like any sort of logical explanation. Like she teleports. The girlfriend can teleport. There you go. Like, you know, I don't buy any of that particularly, but
no, I completely agree.
Those overall though, it's like I still, when I watch those, like, okay, I do see why people draw the comparison. It's like it's an old building, there's a dead body, it's storming out, and there's spooky things that happen. So it's like, okay, I can see the connection. That, and there's, you know, some good sets, good lighting, good imagery.
That whole first act, I feel, was very well done. Like the whole mystery behind it, I felt like it kind of killed itself a little bit in the second half, or like the second half.
Again, great concepts, because I loved when they peeled back her skin and it's tattooed on the inside. And I was like, oh, that's such a cool concept. That's a great idea. You know, it's like little things like that where there's little bits of gold in it, and then just not quite reaching its full potential. Yeah, but
no, for sure.
Overall,
your Halloween update, that's gone out now, or is it's gone out?
Yeah, I wanted to get it out before October 1st, because part of the update is I added the game reads your system clock, and if it's October, that's when all the stuff happens. And if it's once it's November, all that stuff's going to go away. It doesn't matter if you have seasonal events on or not. Like the decorations will go away. The clown's not in circulation anymore. It's just for this month, right? And I decided to do that because I did something similar with Kohate for Halloween, where I was like, oh, it'd be really cool if the game just did it for you. Because I didn't want to do something where it's like I do a patch, and then when Halloween's over, I have to do another patch where it's gone. Right? Like I wanted something that I could keep growing and players could expect to happen, even if I don't have an update planned. There's like, oh, well, if I log back in, there'll be the Halloween stuff, and I really like the clown, you know, the dead clown body or whatever.
No, I love that too.
Play, right?
I'm gonna, host my inner Twitter self here and get offended for a second.
Okay.
The first time you add a redhead into the game, it had to be a clown. You fucking asshole.
He's not redhead. He doesn't have any hair. He's fine.
Unless
He's
I
got
saw
a
a bad
red. He has
picture.
a red nose.
Ah, red nose. See, now I'm a little
There's
stupid.
no redhead yet.
Okay.
Now, just because you said that, the next body is going to be a redhead, and they're going to be the most beautiful person.
Well, I
Be
mean,
the
that's
most
just
attractive person I've ever put in the game.
that goes without saying. I mean, I don't think you can have a bad-looking redhead. That's just my opinion.
One or the other. I'll make it a mixed bag. It's either going to be the most beautiful, perfect human being, or they're just going to be like hit by a train.
Yeah.
One or
Like
the other.
This is the first body where you can see the scarring is only on the face. It's been caved in.
First body completely mangled.
Yeah.
It's just a redhead.
The body twitches, and instead of like going disformed, it just goes back to normal. That's how fucked that shit is.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't do you like that.
Yeah.
I hate to say I just got the 5-minute warning for my my things I've got to be doing.
Yeah,
So
no problem,
I don't want. I'm not like, oh, bye, see ya.
Yeah,
I
I got you.
Know that I got the warning.
Yeah, I'll just pop you with a quick question before you leave.
Speed round. Whatever you got.
Speed round. Favorite horror film or games or both?
So I'm much more of a film person. Like that's where a lot of influence come from. And as I'm a huge fan of found footage. Paranormal Activity is the thing that when it first came out, like I mean it's been used a lot since then and kind of overdone maybe.
Yeah.
But when it first came out, that thing made me feel so uncomfortable in my house for so long. And so that's a huge one. But then there's other ones like The Exorcist and Poltergeist and things like that, where like the older ones that Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm huge fans of those as well. So it's like film is one I'm a huge fan of in general, but Paranormal Activity is one that definitely like put me in the like kind of the way I think of doing things.
Fan of Insidious, the original Insidious, or you don't like that
series?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that
does
the tension build up and release very well.
Yep.
That's definitely one of the ones that I think of when I go to films.
Yeah.
And then apart from films, what about games? Any games come to mind horror wise? Because like the ones that you mentioned aren't really horror based.
Yeah, Silent Hill is one that I really enjoyed. And then the PT demo is that's a simple one. That's kind of a given for anybody nowadays. I don't want to like build anything like it because I feel like one that's been done a lot, and also that's like it exists in stasis as a muse for anyone that wants to do horror, right? Because it never got completed, so it's like the Boba Fett of horror games, where if it doesn't get elaborated on, it will always be perfect. You know,
I feel like we'll just leave it over there and it'll be perfect. All right.
Yeah.
And any advice to anyone who wants to start publishing or creating games?
I would say baby step it, because I think a very common thing is to want to you get an idea, you want to make that idea, and you just go all in and start building it, and then you don't know where to go because it's such a massive undertaking that you get overwhelmed and it's really easy to lose motivation, and that's what kills projects, right?
Right.
But if you start out with like I mentioned earlier, I'm self-taught for programming. I did the same approach where I wanted to do one thing, like I wanted to know how to make a door open when you press a button. So I learned how to do that, like just move a cube when you press a button. And I did that, and that felt really awesome because I accomplished something. And so I did that for a bunch of different things. I was like, well, what are things in games that I do? Okay, well, how do I do something when I click with the mouse? How do I tell what you're looking at on screen? How do I do this, that, and the other thing, right? And so I did these smaller things because it fires the reward center of your brain. So when you're making a game, break it down into small things, and like really small things in terms of like the props you need to make, the code you need to make, like things where you can complete it in a day or two and look at it and be like, oh, I made that door and the door looks great and it works. I made that car and it's good and done, and now that's in. And you're slowly building your project and achieving things. And I think that's what keeps you on track.
Sweet. I appreciate you giving the time, man. You've been
Absolutely.
really,
I'm sorry.
really...
I'm sorry. I have to jump out like
No, I completely
instantly.
get you, bro. No worries.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Well, Twitter is probably the best one. That's at DS Digital Dev. That's where I put like all of my updates, anything that I got going on. I share everybody's stuff.
Your
It's,
Twitter
it's where I'm
beef,
gonna,
you know.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's where I'm going to share this and everything. Other than that, the YouTube, the dog. Great. YouTube is where I live stream. I'm just starting that back up again, and then Discord. I hang out in there all the time in the Darkstone Discord. And
If you're...
now my
Your dog's losing shit.
Yoshi, quiet.
Yoshi, oh my god,
Yes.
that is a great name, man. If you are watching this on YouTube, guys, the links will all be in the description anyway. If you're watching on Spotify, go over to the YouTube and check it if you want, or just follow what he said there. You got a film coming out as well, right?
Yeah,
Or, not coming out, but in the works, yeah.
It's in process. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're doing script revisions and everything. It's pretty crazy,
Yeah.
pretty wild time.
Well, good luck with all that, man. You deserve all the
Thank you
success
very
you've
much.
gotten and more, man. You've been
Thank
really
you.
nice.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. Again,
no
I'm sorry I
problem.
got
Thanks for joining.
out so soon.
No, I completely
really
understand, bro.
appreciate it.
I'm
great time.
honestly, the fact
Thank
you
you.
even came on is great for me. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I had a great time. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. Enjoy your day.
All right, you too. Thank you.